and tone. Quickly remind me which one is which. Mood is Jason.
How we feel about the text, and tone is how the author feels.
Yes, mood is how you feel. Tone is the author and how the story is being written. Where are you going? Okay, so I wanted to go back to that a little bit, and we are going to review with a mood and tone. And not optional. So get out your Chromebooks. I will let you grab a Chromebook for this, Jason. Hang on, and I will present for you guys.
Can I come up to the room?
Wait, are we doing teams?
Right under here. Wait a minute.
Turn on. Turn on.
Computer says no. Turn on.
Computer.
Kill it. Question.
What if you what?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So,
Hang on, pause. Face-to-face friends. Stop talking, please. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
You on my social studies test, it said that you looked at the test, but then you didn't tell me my score.
I wrote your score in the comments. Did I not? Hang on.
Wait, Miss Crab.
All right, guys, quickly get logged in. Did you finish, Kaylee? Did you finish the chapter?
Miss Crab, we can't log in. But you didn't put any comments or anything on there.
Hang on.
I think I need to sign out and I left it. Ducks. Please keep it right there.
All right, hang on just a second, Josie. I'm looking.
Who's Laser?
I'm taking this card.
I'm just patching these.
What? Why didn't I put your score on there? That's so rude of me. You are correct. I did not. Find my folder with the grades in it. I think I know what you got.
Dude, it's so easy. All you do is
Are you sure? All right, guys, quickly get logged in. Sorry about that, Josie. I just put a comment on it right now.
All right. Get back on.
Hey, Miss Crab, we can't see the whole screen.
Yeah, but can you see the number you need to log in?
Yes.
I will fix it in just a second.
Yeah, so fix it.
It's gonna be a long day for y'all.
I'm gonna be good, I promise.
I'm not having a problem with you. I'm having a problem with Sass Pants over there.
Okay, I will not sign no time.
All right, are we ready?
No.
Get ready.
I'm still
There is no reason it should take this long for you guys to be logged in. So I'm gonna count down and you better be logged in. Wait, Kaylee, you said you finished that other chapter?
Look,
Okay.
it's bad. Sign in. Someone did God. X them out.
Yeah, I don't like that. Where's my mouse?
I don't know if we can do that in school.
Yeah.
And they'll retry.
No, no. All right, guys, we need to get going on this. I don't want to take too long on this. So here we go.
No.
10,
Put in poo. I don't know. No.
9,
It's not loading.
8,
Mason's not on the right one.
7, 6, where did it go?
It's not loading.
5,
Okay, I'm entering
4,
the 10. If this thing was blue.
3,
Put in poop.
2,
No.
A PN.
1. Macy, are you kin?
No, I'm none of those. Neither am I. Who's Ken? Really, son? If it says Ken, that means Ken. It could have been like it's the Barbie. Yeah, that's what I was.
All right, again, it does not take this long, guys. There's no reason for this. You could actually just type your own name. Like, it goes 10,000 times faster. Cute names and trying to have the cutest, like, stupid name. Like, come on, guys, let's go. I'm starting. I'm done wasting time with this. You can still get in after the fact. The code will be posted. Here we go. Who is the master of mood and tone? We can turn the lights off if make it easier in here.
Oh, yeah.
All right, good job.
Oh, that was tone, not mood. I can't
Yep.
see it. I wasn't able to see back there.
Way to go. What is mood?
Oh, the first one.
That's the easy one.
Yeah, they put them all in the same place.
Awesome job, friends.
Oh, yeah.
Are the virtual kids on here? I'm 3 points behind you.
All right, how can you make this have an angry tone? Be sitting in your seat before the bell rings.
Got it.
Good job. If you were angry, you would not whisper, I don't think. I don't usually whisper when I'm angry.
I'm behind you.
Oh, sorry.
Defensive tone. My brother broke the lamp, not me.
Oh, dang.
What the heck? It looks like it's got melted into the floor. Yeah. It's actually, yeah, it's like it's like bending into the floor.
All right.
My brother broke the lamp.
Defensive, you're feeling kind of upset, so you might be yelling that because you don't want to get in
But the
trouble.
last one was yellow. Sean, you got it wrong.
Yes. Oh, it's PH. No, they don't.
Even though the Lions lost last week, I still think they have a shot at the playoffs.
Oh my gosh.
It's kind
There you go. Optimistic, like hopeful. Okay.
Why does anyone have Yeah.
What kind of car is this? I feel safer with the seatbelt off.
What kind of car is this? I feel safe.
There's a teddy bear in the car.
All right, sarcastic. I feel safer with the seatbelt off. Do we actually feel safer with the seatbelt
Yeah.
off?
No!
Probably
Yes, I
not.
What are you talking about? A seatbelt can cut open your throat.
No.
It's tall enough. Yeah, if you're too short, that's why.
Okay.
Being laser
That's
came
how
up.
you look.
Wow.
Depressed.
That's not something to joke about.
All right, quit tapping your pencil or I'm throwing it out the window, said the smiling Mrs. Walker.
I didn't read the last part.
She's smiling. Humorous. She was joking. The smiling gave it away. The fact that she was smiling when she said it gave it away.
I just read quit tapping.
If she was angry, would she be smiling?
My
Do I usually
parents-
smile when I'm angry?
No.
when my parents like super mad, she smiles like.
You're like you're gonna die.
Yeah, that's why.
I don't think a teacher would do that. Your mom might give you the "you're gonna die" smile, but I don't think a teacher would do that. Have I given a "you're gonna die" smile to somebody in
Yes.
here? No.
You've looked at me.
I've looked at you that way, maybe. I guess I'll go home to my empty apartment and watch cartoons by myself, sighed Justin.
Depressed.
No, he's not.
Guys, quit yelling out the answers and just put what you think.
He's excited, guys.
All right.
He's super excited.
I know.
Guys, he was so excited.
Shh, guys, chill.
I am. Your turn, please.
Your tone can change. You're a big help. From a compliment to a, you're a big help.
Ooh, this one's a good one.
Oh, they were being sarcastic. Totally.
Why are you guys shouting out answers? I don't want that to happen.
Wait, that was
I want you to actually push a button and choose your answer without shouting it out.
I picked the wrong one. Though. I thought it was not.
Well, see, then you should be keeping your mouth hushed. Lucas is the highest climber. What kind of mood might be evoked by a story that takes place in an empty hospital? Ooh, careful on this one.
No.
Oh, didn't read all my choices.
I
Boom.
accidentally like I was moving.
I was moving my mouse.
Some of you guys get so worried about being quick and you don't read all of the choices.
Miss Deb, I misclicked, but I misclicked on the right answer.
Yeah, that's what I did.
What?
No one said it would be easy. Everybody got it right. No, not everybody.
No. Only got two. Come here, right
Wait, time out. I clicked the wrong answer. Look.
Come here, right
Okay, all right,
Everything wrong.
and
Laser.
Who is Laser?
who is Laser?
Grayson. Of course it's Grayson.
Grayson.
I went from
All
last
right.
place to first.
Fourth is PH.
Yeah, Parker.
I was
Sender number
actually.
5.
I
Who is
was.
PH?
Parker Hardy. He was
Duh.
in first for longest of time, and then he adopted.
Yeah.
Can we do another one?
All right, guys, we are, nope, go back to your desk. We are going to get going with,
Catch it.
nope, we're done with Hatchet.
No.
Redford.
Yeah.
Redford.
There's a. That's mean.
Hey, oh, class, chill with the chatty. Just go right back to your desk. I'm ready to read.
What's Jay?
Jason, I don't think I was. Miss Babs kind of not in the mood for that subject. I don't think about it.
Are you guys going to stop talking anytime soon? Some of you haven't stopped talking since you got it from the Kahoot, or really since the Kahoot started. Okay. All right, chapter 11. When we left off, we had just rescued old Dan from a muskrat den.
Oh yeah.
And they got the coon and they came
I thought
home.
it was a mushroom.
And then they went after another coon that kept climbing up the tree, and old Dan kept trying to climb up the tree and didn't understand. He didn't need to go up the tree. So old Dan kept getting himself into predicaments, and Billy had had enough. He was glad to get home and be done hunting for a little bit. Because old Dan was just getting into trouble.
He was taught to
He was taught to go after that coon no matter what.
and so
He doesn't understand that he's getting himself into these goofball situations that he can't get out of. All right, chapter 11. I had often wondered what old Dan would do if little Ann got into some kind of predicament. And one night I got my answer. For several days, a northern blizzard had been blowing. It was a bad one. The temperature dropped down to 10 below. The storm started with a slow, cold drizzle and then sleet. When the wind started blowing, everything froze, leaving the ground as slick as glass. Trapped indoors, I was as nervous as a fish out of water. I told Mama I guessed it was going to storm all winter. She laughed and said, I don't think it will, but it does look like it'll last for a while. She ruffled up my hair and kissed me between the eyes. This did rile me up. I didn't like to be kissed like that. It seemed that I could practically rub my skin off and still feel it all wet and sticky and kind of burning. Sometime on the 5th night, the storm blew itself out and it snowed about 3 inches.
Ooh,
The next morning, I went out to my doghouse. Scraping the snow away from the two-way door I stuck my head in. It was as warm as an oven. I got my face washed all over by little Ann. Old Dan's tail thumped out a tune on the wall. I told him to be ready because we were going hunting that night. I knew the old ringtails would be hungry and stirring, for they'd been denned up during the storm. That evening, as I was leaving the house, Papa said, Billy, be careful tonight. It's slick down under the snow, and it would be easy to twist an ankle or break a leg. I told him I would and that I wasn't going far, just to the back of our fields in the bottoms. Well, anyway, he said, be careful. There'll be no moon tonight, and you're going to see some fog next to the river. Walking through our fields, I saw my father was right about it being slick and dark. Several times I slipped and sat down. I couldn't see anything beyond the glow of my lantern, but I wasn't worried. My light was a good one, and Mama had insisted that I make 2 little leather pouches to cover the blades of my axe. Just before I reached the timber, old Dan shook the snow from the underbrush with his deep voice. I stopped and listened, and he bawled again. The deep bass tones rolled around under the tall sycamores, tore their way out of the thick timber, traveled out over the fields, and slammed up against the foothills. There they seemed to break up and die away in the mountains. Old Dan was working the trail slowly, and I knew why. He would never line out until little Ann was running by his side. I thought she would never get there. When she did, her beautiful voice made the blood pound in my temples. I felt the excitement of the hunt as it ate its way into my body. Taking a deep breath, I reared back and whooped as loud as I could. The coon ran up the river for a way, and in cutting out of the bottoms, he headed for the mountains. I stood and listened until their voices went out of hearing. Slipping and sliding, I started in the direction I had last heard them. About halfway to the foothills, I heard them coming back. Somewhere in the rugged mountains, the coon had turned and headed toward the river. It was about time for him to play out a few tricks, and I was wondering what he would do. It would be hard for him to hide his trail with snow on the ground, and I realized later that the smart old coon knew this too. As the voices of my dogs grew louder, I could tell that they were coming straight toward me. Once I started to blow out my lantern, thinking that maybe I could see them when they crossed our field, but I realized I didn't stand a chance of seeing the race in the skunk black night. Down out of the mountains they brought him, singing a hound dog song on his heel. The coon must have scented me or seen my lantern. He cut to my right and ran between our house and me. I heard screaming and yelling from my sisters. My father started whooping. I knew my whole family was out on the porch listening to the beautiful voices of my little red hounds. I felt as tall as the tallest sycamore on the riverbank. I yelled loud as I could. Again I heard the squealing of my sisters and the shouts of my father. The deep oh-woo-woos of old Dan and the sharp ow-wow-wow-wow-wows of little Ann bored a hole in the inky black night. The vibrations rolled and quivered in the icy silence. The coon was heading for the river. I could tell my dogs were crowding him and wondered if he'd make it to the water. I was hoping he wouldn't, for I didn't want to wade in the cold water unless I had to do it. I figured the smart old coon had a reason for turning and coming back to the river and wondered what trick he had in mind. I remembered something my grandfather told me. He said, never underestimate the cunning of an old river coon. When the nights are dark and the ground is frozen and slick, they can pull some mean tricks on a hound. Sometimes the tricks can be fatal. I was halfway through the fog-covered bottoms when the voices of my dogs stopped. I stood still, waited, and listened. A cold silence settled over the bottoms. I could hear the snap and crack of sap-frozen limbs. From far back in the flinty hills, the long, lonesome howl of a timber wolf floated down in the silent night. Across the river, I heard a cow moo. I knew the sound was coming from the Lowry place. Yeah, Sophie?
So in Hatchet, wasn't there a book on, or wolf on the
Mhm.
around there?
Making a connection, text-to-text connection of wolves on the mountains. Okay.
That could be
Not being able to hear the voices of my dogs gave me an uncomfortable feeling. I whooped and waited for one of them to bawl. As I stood waiting, I realized something was different in the bottom. Something was missing. I wasn't worried about my dogs. I figured that the coon had pulled some trick and sooner or later they would unravel the trail. But the feeling that something was just not right had me worried. I whooped several times but could still get no answer. Stumbling, slipping, and sliding, I started on. Reaching the river, I saw it was frozen over. And I realized what my strange, uneasy feeling was. I had not been able to hear the sound of the water. As I stood listening, I heard a gurgle out in the middle of the stream. The river wasn't frozen all the way across. The still, eddy waters next to the banks had frozen, but out in the middle, where the current was swift, the water was running, leaving a trough in the ice pack. The gurgling sound I had heard was the swift current as it sucked its way through the channel. I'm going to pause there. So think about this. So the river's mostly frozen, except for right in the middle. And because it's frozen and there's only a little bit of space for the water to run, it's running super fast right there in the middle. Does that make sense?
Well, then if it's in the water, it'll bring them under the ice.
Okay. And if the dogs fall in the water, Zeke says it's going to drag them under the ice.
Plus it's cold.
And it's freezing water.
Well, little Ann will probably find a way out, but old Dan, I don't know about.
All
Why
right.
can't we find our way into a muskrat?
Okay.
Oh yeah, true.
Yeah, what if we got another muskrat in it?
Yeah, that would be actually very helpful.
The last time I had heard my dogs, they were downstream from me. I walked on listening. I hadn't gone far when I heard old Dan. What I heard froze the blood in my veins. He wasn't bawling on a trail or giving the tree bark. It was one long, continuous cry. In his deep voice, there seemed to be a pleading cry for help. Scared, worried, and with my heart beating like a churn dasher, I started toward the sound. I almost passed him, but with another cry, he let me know where he was. He was out in the ice pack. I couldn't see him for the fog. I called to him, and he answered with a low whine. Again, I called his name, and this time he came to me. He wasn't the same dog. His tail was between his legs, and his head was bowed down. He stopped about 7 feet from me. Sitting down on the ice, he raised his head and howled the most mournful cry I had ever heard. What is mournful?
I don't know.
Macy.
Like a painful.
Painful? Kindle.
The saddest cry you've ever heard.
Sad. Sad, sad, sad. A lot of times you hear the word mourning when someone has died. You are in mourning. You are like that deep, deep, deep sadness when somebody dies. That's being
Like some people
mournful.
Like
Okay.
when you hear some people didn't wake up.
Yep. Turning around, he trotted back out to the ice and disappeared in the fog. I knew something had happened to little Ann. I called her name. She answered with a pleading cry. Although I couldn't see her, I guessed what had happened. The coon had led them to the river. Running out on the ice, he had leaped across the trough. My dogs, hot on the trail, had followed. Old Dan, a more powerful dog than Little Ann, had made the leap. Little Ann had not made it. Her small feet had probably slipped on the slick ice, and she had fallen in the icy waters. Old Dan, seeing the fate of his little friend, had quit the chase and come back to help her. The smart old coon had pulled his trick, and a deadly one it was. I had to do something. She would never be able to get out by herself, and it was only a matter of time until her body would be paralyzed by the freezing water. Laying my axe down, I held my lantern out in front of me and stepped out on the ice. It started cracking and popping. I jumped back to the bank. Although it was thick enough to hold the light weight of my dogs, it wasn't going to hold me. Little Ann started whining and begging for help. I went to all the pieces and started crying. Something had to be done and done quickly, or my little dog was lost. I thought of running home for a rope or for my father, but I knew she couldn't last until I got back. I was desperate. It was impossible for me to swim in the freezing water. I wouldn't last for a minute. She cried again, begging for the one thing I couldn't give her, help. I thought if only I could see her, maybe I could figure out some way I could help. Looking at my lantern gave me an idea. I ran up the bank about 30 feet, turned and looked back. I could see the light, not well, but enough for what I had in mind. I grabbed my lantern and axe and ran for the bottoms. I was looking for a stand of wild cane. After what seemed like ages, I found it. With the longest one I could find, I hurried back. After it was trimmed and the limber end cut off, I hung the lantern by the handle on the end of it and started easing it out on the ice. I saw old Dan first. He was sitting close to the edge of the trough looking down. Then I saw her. I groaned at her plight. A plight is a problem. Okay? All I could see was her head and her small front paws. Her claws were spread out and digging into the ice. She knew if she ever lost that hold, she was gone. Old Dan raised his head and howled. Hound though he was, he knew it was the end of the trail for his little pal. I wanted to get my light as close to little Ann as I could, but my pole was a good 8 feet short. Setting the lantern down, I eased the pole from under the handle. I thought, I'm no better off than I was before. In fact, I'm worse off. Now I can see when the end comes. Little Ann cried again. I saw her claws slip on the ice. Her body settled lower in the water. Old Dan howled and started fidgeting. He knew the end was close. I didn't exactly know when I started out toward my dog. I had taken only 2 steps when the ice broke. I twisted my body and fell toward the bank. Just as my hand closed on a root, I thought my feet touched bottom, but I wasn't sure. As I pulled myself out, I felt the numbing cold creep over my legs. With my pole, I fished the lantern back to the bank. I took the handle off, straightened it out, and bent a hook in one end. With one of my shoelaces, I tied the wire to the end of the cane pole. I left the hook sticking out about 6 inches beyond the end of it. I started shouting encouragement to little Ann. I told her to hang on and not give up, for I was going to save her. She answered with a low cry. With the hook stuck in one of the ventilating holes in the top of my light, I lifted it back out on the ice and set it down. After a little wiggling and pushing, I worked the hook loose and laid the pole down. I took off my clothes. Why did he take off his clothes?
Because you didn't want to get him freezing wet.
I don't want to get him freezing wet. Some of them are already wet because it sounds like he kind of fell in the water a little bit when the ice broke. So you don't want to keep those wet, cold clothes on your body. Josie.
Because, like, this was in Harry Potter, too. Because whenever he gets back out, then it'll make him warmer.
Yeah. I totally remember that. When Harry had to go get the Sword of Gryffindor. Yeah, I'm with you, Joes. But yes, if you have cold clothes on your body in the cold air, you can get hypothermia, which is where your body is so cold that it starts to shut down. You don't want that to happen. You can actually get more body heat if your skin is exposed than if you have cold clothing, wet clothing on top of it, because the cold clothing is actually going to freeze to your skin. Hello. Yes, it is. Yeah, but I want to talk to you first about why they are that way. But I'm in the middle of reading right now. Can I call you back in like a minute? Okay, all right.
Someone from home?
Okay, no, nothing. All right, it's Mr. Marshall. I've got to call him back. Okay. Yeah, so
I can't find the page.
well, I am on page 136.
On yours, it's probably.
I'm halfway down. She's got the same copy as me, I think. And
Yeah, she has the same
right
copy of that.
I took off my clothes, picked up my axe, and stepped down into the hole in the icy water. It came to my knees. Step by step, breaking the ice with my axe, I waded out. So he's in the water, but it's only up to his knees, so that's not too bad. And he's using his axe to break the ice in front of him so he can get out further. Okay? Making sense? All right.
But then that's gonna
The water came up to my hips, then my waist. The cold bite of it took my breath away. I felt my body grow numb. I couldn't feel my feet at all, but I knew they were moving. When the water reached my armpits, I stopped and worked my pole toward little Ann. Stretching my arms as far out as I could, I saw I was still a foot short. Closing my eyes and gritting my teeth, I moved on. The water reached my chin. I was close enough. I started hooking at the collar of little Ann. Time after time, I felt the hook almost catch. I saw I was fishing on a wrong angle. She had settled so low in the water I couldn't reach her collar. Raising my arms above my head so the pole would be on a slant, so he's trying to come down at her collar instead of straight. So he's coming like this, okay? Raising my arms above my head so the pole would be on a slant, I kept hooking and praying. The seconds ticked by. I strained for 1 more inch. The muscles in my arms grew numb from the weight of the pole. Little Ann's claw slipped again. I thought she was gone. At the very edge of the ice, she caught again. All I could see now were her small red paws and her nose and her eyes. By old Dan's actions, I could tell he understood and wanted to help. He ran over close to my pole and started digging at the ice. I whooped him with the cane. That was the only time in my life I ever hit my dog. I had to get him out of the way so I could see what I was doing. Just when I thought my task was impossible, I felt the hook slide under the tough leather. It was none too soon. As gently as I could, I dragged her over the rim of the ice. At first, I thought she was dead. She didn't move. Old Dan started whining and licking her face and ears. She moved her head. I started talking to her. She made an effort to stand but couldn't. Her muscles were paralyzed and the blood had long since ceased to flow. At the movement of little Ann, old Dan threw a fit. He started barking and jumping. His long red tail fanned the air. Still holding on to my pole, I tried to take a step backward. My feet wouldn't move. A cold grip and fear came over me. I thought my legs were frozen. I made another effort to lift my leg and it moved. I realized that my feet were just stuck in the soft, muddy bottom. I started backing out, dragging the body of my little dog. I couldn't feel the pole in my hands. When my feet touched the icy bank, I couldn't feel that either. All the feeling in my body was gone. I wrapped little Ann in my coat and hurried into my clothes. With the pole, I fished my light back. Close by was a large drift. I climbed up on top of it and dug a hole down through the ice and snow until I reached dry linens. I poured half of the oil in my lantern down into the hole and dropped in a match. In no time, I had a roaring fire. I laid little Ann close to the warm heat and went to work. Old Dan washed her head with his warm red tongue while I massaged and rubbed her body. I could tell by her cries when the blood started circulating. Little by little, her strength came back. I stood her on her feet and started walking her. She was weak and wobbly, but I knew she would live. I felt much better, and I breathed a sigh of relief. After drying myself out the best I could, I took the lantern handle from the pole, bent it back to its original position, and put it back on the lantern. Holding the light out in front of me, I looked at it. The bright metal gleamed in the firelight glow. I started talking to it. I said, "Thanks, old lantern, more than you'll ever know. I'll always take care of you. Your globe will always be clean, and there'll never be any rust or dirt on your frame." Why does he want to take such good care of this lantern? Save the dogs, right? Without that lantern, he would have never seen the dogs and been able to figure out how to save little Ann. Okay. I knew if it had not been for the miracle of my lantern, my little dog would have met her death that night. Her grave would have been the cold, icy waters of the Illinois River. Out in the river, I could hear the cold water gurgling in the icy trough. It seemed to be angry. It hissed and growled as it tore its way through the channel. I shuddered to think of what could have happened. Before I left for home, I walked back to the sycamore tree. Once again, I said a prayer, but this time the words were different. I didn't ask for a miracle. In every way a young boy could, I said thanks. My second prayer wasn't said with just words. All of my heart and soul was in it. On my way home, I decided not to say anything to my mother and father about little Ann's accident. I knew it would scare Mama, and she might stop my hunting. Reaching our house, I didn't hang the lantern in its usual place. I took it to my room and set it in a corner with the handle standing out. The next morning, I started sneezing and came down with a terrible cold. I told Mama I'd gotten my feet wet. She scolded me a little and started doctoring me. How do you think his Mama would have felt if he told her what really happened?
He would.
EJ.
She would have told him to stop hunting and would have, she would be very protective over him because he almost got thrown down the river.
Right, yeah. We already know Mama's worried about him over little things. If she knew about this big thing, she probably wouldn't have let him go hunting anymore. You're right. All right. For 3 days and nights, I stayed home. All this time, I kept checking the handle of the lantern. My sisters shook the house from the roof to the floor with their playing and romping, but the handle never did fall. I went to my mother and asked her if God answers prayers every time one was said. She smiled and said, "No, Billy, not every time. He only answers the ones that are said from the heart. You have to be sincere and believe in him." She wanted to know why I'd asked. I said, "Oh, I just wondered. I wanted to know." She came over and straightened my suspenders, saying, "That was a very nice question for my little Daniel Boone to ask." Bending over, she started kissing me. I finally squirmed away from her, feeling as wet as a dirt daughter's nest. My mother never could kiss me like a fella should be kissed. Before she was done, I was kissed all over. It always made me feel silly and baby-like. I tried to tell her that a coon hunter wasn't supposed to be kissed that way, but Mama never could understand things like that. I stomped out of the house to see how my dogs were. That's what mamas do. All right, friends, we are going to do your paper today. And I do want you to do every single question on here today. The question at the very top that just says mood. Describe how you feel when we have a snow day. We had plenty of those. Okay. The questions about chapter 11, the vocabulary, and then there's another mood question at the end, the enrichment. Yes, do all of it today. You've got time. All right? That's what we got for today.
We have like 20 minutes.
You got time.
Do you want me to pass this out?
Yeah, I got it.
20 minutes.
Oh, my Lord. Stop with the extra noise. That's just not necessary. All right. Virtual friends, you are good to go. If you'd like, you can hang up. I'm going to turn the recording off. And you guys can go work on your worksheet as well. Now I feel like I need to go watch Harry Potter a little bit, Josie.
I've watched them all so many times.